Captain Hyansu looked at the big screen floating in front of him. The numbers made his stomach feel sick. 847 systems voted yes. 12 voted no, 3 did not vote at all. Earth was kicked out of the galactic empire like throwing away trash. The voting was done. The human race was no longer welcome in civilized space. Ambassador Genet spoke through the radio from the council building on Proxima Station. Her voice shook with anger. She usually stayed calm, but not today. The Empire leaders had made her mad, really mad. They are giving us 30 days, she said to the emergency meeting on Earth. 30 days to stop all Empire business and give up our colonies. Shinsu sat in the meeting room high above Earth. The other leaders looked shocked, some looked angry, others looked scared, but Hyansu felt something different. He felt excited. The Empire said humans were too mean, too wild, too dangerous. Other alien races complained that humans fought too hard. They said humans scared them. The last problem happened at Kepler Station, where human soldiers saved everyone from space pirates. 3 other alien groups ran away, but humans stayed and fought. The Empire called it too much violence. Humans called it doing the right thing. Admiral Dong Hyan was an old soldier with scars on his face and hands. He had fought in many space battles. His fingers made noise on the metal table as he thought about what this meant. 30 days, he said slowly. They think we will spend that time crying and asking them to take us back. President Sujin appeared as a blue ghost image from Seoul Command Center on Earth. Her face looked serious but strong. The plans to move people are already starting. Our space teams found 17 good planets beyond Empire space. Dr. Young Mi was Earth's best alien life scientist. She pulled up star maps on her tablet. Her fingers moved fast as she marked different star systems. The Andromeda area looks best. 3 systems with many good planets, lots of rocks to mine, and completely outside Empire control. Captain Hyansu stood up tall like a soldier should. With respect, ma'am, moving our people sounds like we are running away scared. What if we are not moving away? What if we are growing bigger? Everyone in the room got quiet. The meaning of his words hung in the air like a dare to the whole universe. General Minho had many scars from the Titan Wars. He cracked his finger bones as he thought the Empire has 30,000 worlds, but they spread too thin. Most of their military just keeps peace and does parades. They have not fought a real war in 300 years because they kick out or destroy anyone who might fight back, said Ambassador Genet through the speakers. Her voice was sharp. Which is exactly what they are trying to do to us. President Sujin leaned forward in her ghost image. How many of our people are ready to leave Earth? All of them, Captain Hyansu said without waiting. Every human colony, every space station, every research post has already started getting ready. The moment the vote happened, our people started packing. Dr. Young Mi could barely contain her excitement. Our first scans show these systems have everything we need, lots of materials, good positions, and most important, they are far enough from Empire space that we can build without them bothering us. Admiral Dong Hyan smiled for the first time in months. Then we are not refugees, we are explorers. The meeting went on for hours as they made their bold plan. Instead of waiting for the Empire's ultimatum to end, humanity would start leaving right away. But this would not be a scared run into the unknown. This would be the biggest coordinated expansion in human history. Captain Hyansu talked with fleet commanders all around the solar system. Every ship that could fly would be loaded with people, equipment, and supplies. The Great Generation ships that had been stored away after humanity joined the Empire were being fixed and upgraded with technology learned from 300 years of galactic life communications. Officer Dajin monitored signals from human settlements across the galaxy. The response was immediate and universal. Every human outpost from the inner colonies to the frontier research stations began evacuation procedures without being ordered, sir, she reported to Captain Hyansu. The mining stations at Proxima report full evacuation readiness. The research facilities at Volf 359 are requesting transport priority for their data. Archives, the colonial governors are asking for fleet assignments. What amazed the leadership was not just the speed of response, but the attitude. Human families packed their belongings with determination, not despair. Children asked when they would see their new homes, not if they would survive the journey. Engineer Wu Jin supervised the preparation of the colony ship Terra Nova. His team worked around the clock to modify the massive vessel. Drive systems that had been designed for Empire standards were being upgraded beyond anything the Empire had ever imagined. We are not just leaving, he told his crew. We are proving that humans can do better than the Empire ever did. The Empire observers stationed throughout human space to watch the evacuation began sending worried reports back to their headquarters. What they saw was not a desperate exodus, but a military precision operation that revealed capabilities the Empire had never suspected. Humans possessed. Dr. Heijin established communication networks between the departing fleets that would maintain contact across interstellar distances. Her breakthrough in faster-than-light messaging meant that humanity would remain unified, even when spread across multiple star systems. The children are adapting remarkably well. Reported Dr. Insu from the education ships. Young humans show natural ability to handle the transition to space life better than many species that evolved in zero gravity. As the first wave of ships prepared for departure, Captain Hinsu received a message that changed everything. Intelligence reports showed that several non-human species within the Empire were secretly requesting information about humanity's new territories. Some wanted to send observers, others were asking about immigration possibilities. The Empire had intended to isolate humanity by casting them out. Instead, they had created something that other species found attractive. Commander Ji-hoon realized as he reviewed the intelligence data, we are not just leaving the Empire, we are giving others a reason to question why they stay. President Sujin called the final meeting before the great departure began. Her image appeared on screens throughout the solar system, reaching every human who would make the journey to the new worlds. The Empire wanted to exile us because they feared what we might become, she said. Let us show them they were right to be afraid. The countdown had begun, but humanity was not watching the clock with fear. They watched it with hope. In 30 days, Earth would officially be cast out from the galactic empire. In reality, humanity would be long gone, building something bigger than the Empire had ever imagined. The solar system had never seen anything like it. Every human settlement from Mercury mining stations to Pluto research posts worked like busy ant hills as the greatest move in galactic history began. Commander Ji-hoon watched the loading at Luna base, where huge cargo ships went up and down like elevators that never stopped. Families carried bags with everything they owned, while engineers packed entire factories into boxes. The organization was amazing, but what surprised watchers most was that nobody seemed scared or sad. Sir, the Martian colonies report they are ahead of schedule, said technician Ga-yun from her control station. Her screen showed hundreds of ships lifting off from the red planet. Each one carried thousands of people and their equipment toward the gathering fleets. Dr. Jin was chief of the Deep Space Navigation Project. She stood before a massive star map showing humanity's new frontier. Her math had found not just planets where people could live, but entire areas of space full of materials the Empire had never bothered to explore. The first wave ships are already reporting successful jumps to the outer markers, she announced happily. The speed of humanity's response surprised even their own leaders. What they planned as a 30-day move was being finished in 15. Every human in the galaxy seemed to understand that this was not an ending, but a beginning. Captain Taehyung commanded the generation ship New Horizon, one of 12 massive ships that would carry most of Earth's people to their new homes. His bridge crew worked smoothly as they coordinated with hundreds of smaller ships in their group. Navigation, confirm our route to Andromeda Sector 7, he ordered. Course plotted and confirmed. Sir, replied Navigator So Young, first jump in 6 hours. All convoy ships report ready. What made the Exodus remarkable was not just its size, but its organization. Humanity had learned from 300 years in the Empire, studying their logistics, their technology, their weaknesses. Now they were using that knowledge to do something the Empire thought impossible, moving an entire species by choice. Engineer Wu Jin watched the massive fusion drives of the colony ship Terra Nova as it prepared for its jump to the outer rim. His team had improved the engines in ways that would have impressed even Empire shipbuilders if they had bothered to look. Drive efficiency at 112% of design specifications, he reported proudly. The Empire representative stationed throughout human space to monitor the evacuation watched in growing amazement as humanity's true abilities became clear. What they had dismissed as a primitive species barely worthy of membership was showing organizational skills that matched the Empire's best military operations. Ambassador S.A. Rama broadcast from the lead diplomatic ship as the great fleets began their final departure sequence. Her message reached every human ship at the same time. Today we leave not as exiles but as explorers. The Empire has given us the greatest gift possible, the chance to prove that humanity's best days lie ahead, not behind thee. First jump flashes lit up space around Earth as the advanced fleets disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them humanity's hopes and dreams, but they also carried something else: 3 centuries worth of imperial technology, trade secrets, and military intelligence that humanity had quietly gathered during their membership. General Kyung-ho led the military escort for the civilian convoys, but his real mission was different. Hidden in his ship's databases was the most complete analysis of imperial military capabilities ever compiled by a single species. All units maintain formation. He broadcast to his fleet, "We are not just protecting the convoys, we are establishing humanity's new strategic doctrine." As Earth's great cities went dark one by one, their populations safely aboard the evacuation ships, the solar system fell quiet for the first time in centuries. But this was not the silence of death or defeat, this was the silence of anticipation. Dr. Insu, humanity's chiefs and archaeologists, took readings from the bridge of the research vessel Discovery as they departed the solar system's edge. "Fascinating," he murmured, studying the data streams. "The Empire's own surveys miss significant resource deposits in our target sectors. They are so focused on their established territories, they have stopped looking for new opportunities." The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just fleeing to empty space, they were claiming territory that the Empire had overlooked or dismissed, territory that might prove more valuable than Earth itself. Trade coordinator Mi Young established the first independent human trade routes between the departing fleets. Her analysis showed economic potential that exceeded anything humanity had achieved. As Empire members, we are not just maintaining our economy, she reported, we are creating something entirely new. The Empire had assumed that exiled humanity would struggle to survive without imperial support. Instead, human engineers were solving problems that had plagued imperial systems for centuries. Communication officer Hai Jin established real-time contact between ships separated by light years using modifications to imperial technology that the Empire had never considered. As the last human ships cleared sole gravitational influence, Captain Hyan-Su stood on the bridge of the command vessel Determination and watched Earth shrink to a pale blue dot behind them. "Signal all fleets," he ordered communications officer. "The Jin Operation New Dawn is complete. Humanity has left the building." The message that reached the Empire monitoring stations was brief but unmistakable. "Thank you for the opportunity. We will be in touch." Dr. Youngmi analyzed the first data from their destination systems, and her excitement was infectious. "The preliminary surveys were conservative," she announced to the fleet commanders. "We are not just going to survive in these new worlds, we are going to thrive in ways the Empire never imagined possible." Most remarkable aspect of the Great Departure was not the logistics or the technology, but the spirit. Every human involved understood that they were not fleeing defeat, but embracing opportunity. The Empire had tried to punish them by taking away their membership in galactic civilization. Instead, they had given humanity the chance to build something better. Engineer Bo Ra supervised the final modifications to the construction equipment that would build humanity's first independent settlements. Her teams had designed modular systems that could establish entire cities in months rather than years. "We are not just carrying our past with us," she told her workers, "we are carrying the tools to build our future." As the great fleets jumped into hyperspace, carrying 12 billion humans toward their new destiny, the solar system fell silent for the first time in human history. But across the galaxy, something new was beginning, something that would change everything the Empire thought they knew about civilization itself. 6 months after the Great Departure, the Andromeda sector buzzed with construction activity that broke every rule the Galactic Empire had about primitive species. What humanity was building was not just colonies, it was a civilization designed from the ground up to be better than everything the Empire had achieved. Chief Engineer Bo stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching as massive construction robots assembled the framework of humanity's first independent shipyard. The station itself was a marvel of efficiency, built in 3 months using parts that could be quickly put together, an expanded resource. Extraction from the asteroid belt exceeds projections by 40%, reported mining coordinator Changmin. From his orbital platform, his teams had deployed equipment that stripped valuable materials from space rocks with ruthless efficiency. We will have enough raw materials to begin Phase 2 construction ahead of schedule, the speed of humanity's expansion amazed even their own planners. Dr. Yoongi, chief of colonial development, monitored the establishment of 17 different settlements across 4 star systems. Each colony was strategically positioned to support the others, creating a connected network that could survive even if individual settlements faced disaster. Agricultural output on New Kyoto exceeds Earth baseline by 30%, she reported during the weekly progress briefing. The modified soil bacteria we developed are performing better than expected in the native environment. Commander Sungwon coordinated the defense networks from his command post on the military station. Fortress Alpha. Unlike the Empire's ceremonial fleets, humanity's new military was designed for real combat against real threats. Sensor grid deployment complete. We now have full coverage of all approach vectors to our core systems. What made humanity's expansion truly remarkable was not just its speed but its innovation, freed from Empire regulations and traditions. Human engineers and scientists were developing technologies that solved problems in ways the Empire had never considered. Dr. Jae-sung's research team had achieved breakthrough after breakthrough in faster-than-light communication, creating a network that connected humanity's scattered settlements with real-time information sharing. Communication lag between our furthest colonies is now less than Imperial communication within single systems, he announced proudly. The economic implications were staggering. Trade coordinator Mi Young watched as human merchant vessels began running cargo between their new settlements, establishing trade routes that completely bypassed Imperial space. Our internal trade volume already represents 12% of what we generated as Empire members, she reported, and it is growing exponentially. But humanity's greatest achievement was something the Empire could not measure: morale. Every human settlement buzzed with energy and purpose that had been missing during their centuries as junior partners in an ancient Empire construction. Foreman Dongwook supervised the assembly of New Seoul, humanity's first purpose-built major city beyond Earth. His teams worked with enthusiasm that impressed even him, building not just structures but symbols of humanity's independence. We are not just constructing buildings, he told his workers. We are constructing our future. The first generation of children born in humanity's new territories were already showing signs of adaptation to their environments that suggested remarkable potential. Pediatrician Eugene documented growth rates and development patterns that exceeded every baseline. These children are not just surviving in their new environments, she reported, they are thriving in ways we never expected. Military shipyards produced vessels that incorporated lessons learned from studying Empire technology while addressing its fundamental weaknesses. Admiral Sang-ho inspected the first human-designed warship built outside Imperial space, the destroyer Indomitable. This ship represents everything we learned about what the Empire does wrong, he observed with satisfaction. The new human military doctrine focused on mobility, flexibility, and overwhelming firepower rather than the Empire's emphasis on ceremony and tradition. Fleet exercises demonstrated capabilities that would have shocked Imperial observers if they had been allowed to watch, perhaps. Most importantly, humanity's new settlements were attracting attention from unexpected sources. Communications Officer Hyjin intercepted messages from other species within the Empire, species that had grown tired of Imperial restrictions and were asking about joining humanity's expansion. We are receiving immigration requests from 17 different species, she reported to the Colonial Council, including 3 that were considered senior partners in the Empire. The irony was not lost on anyone. The Empire had exiled humanity for being too dangerous, too unpredictable, too aggressive, but what they had actually created was a more dynamic, more innovative, more attractive alternative to their own stagnant civilization. Industrial output from the new human settlements already exceeded the production of some entire Imperial provinces. Manufacturing coordinator Jae-min reported efficiency rates that defied conventional wisdom. We are not just rebuilding what we had on Earth, he announced. We are building something fundamentally better. The technological advances were equally impressive. Research Director Su Yung presented breakthrough after breakthrough in fields the Empire had considered fully developed. Human scientists freed from imperial restrictions and conservative thinking were pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. Governor Park Ji-min, elected leader of the new territories, stood before the assembled representatives of humanity's new colonies as she delivered her first State of the Expansion address. 6 months ago, the Empire told us we did not belong in civilized space, she declared. Today, civilized space is coming to us. The transformation was complete. Humanity had gone from refugees to pioneers to leaders of a new kind of galactic civilization, and they were just getting started. The Empire was about to discover that exiling humanity had been the greatest strategic mistake in galactic history. The Imperial Intelligence Briefing Room on Proxima Prime had never hosted such a tense gathering. Fleet Admiral Zenthkar of the Hegemony Navy studied holographic displays showing humanity's expansion with growing concern, while representatives from dozens of imperial species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Intelligence Director Velthorn delivered a report that was devastating in its implications. Human settlements now span 47 star systems across 6 sectors. Their industrial output equals that of a major imperial province, and their expansion rate continues to accelerate. What worried the Empire most was not humanity's growth, but its attractiveness to other species. Border Security Chief Colmath presented data that sent ripples of unease through the assembled officials. 17 imperial member species have submitted formal inquiries about establishing trade relationships with human territories. 3 have requested permission to establish permanent diplomatic missions. The implications were clear. Humanity was not just surviving their exile, they were creating an alternative that other species found appealing. This challenged the fundamental assumption that the Empire represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Economic Advisor Rathven delivered perhaps the most alarming news. Human trade vessels are operating in neutral space, offering services and prices that undercut imperial merchants by an average of 30%. They are not just competing with us, they are winning. Fleet Admiral Zenthkar processed the reports with growing agitation. The Empire had expected humanity to either beg for readmission or fade into obscurity. Instead, they had created something that threatened Empire's economic and political dominance. How is this possible? Demanded Council Representative Mordish from the Hegemony's ruling council. They were exiled with nothing but basic colony ships and personal equipment. Intelligence Director Velthorn's response was even more troubling. Our analysis suggests they never intended to simply establish new colonies. Every aspect of their evacuation was actually a carefully planned expansion operation. They spent 3 centuries studying our technology, our economics, our political structure, and identifying all our weaknesses. The revelation that humanity had been gathering intelligence throughout their Empire membership sent shockwaves through the imperial hierarchy. What they had seen as an honor guard posting human observers throughout imperial space had actually been a comprehensive espionage operation. They know our military capabilities better than we do, admitted Defense Minister Kella, his bioluminescent patches flickering with embarrassment. Their ships are designed specifically to counter our standard tactics and exploit our technological limitations, but the most disturbing development was the stream of defections from imperial space species that had been loyal Empire members for millennia were quietly establishing relationships with humanity's expanding civilization. Some were even requesting permission to relocate to human territories. Cultural Attach Zendalar presented data that struck at the heart of imperial identity. Their colonies report happiness and productivity indices that exceed our best systems by significant margins. They are not just offering economic opportunity, they are offering something we have not provided in centuries. Hoped the Empire's response options were limited, and all problematic military action would validate humanity's claims about imperial aggression while potentially triggering the first major war in 3 centuries. Economic sanctions were meaningless against a civilization that had already cut most ties with imperial trade. Diplomatic pressure assumed humanity cared about their opinion. Internal Security Chief Nalveth raised the most uncomfortable question: what if they are right? What if exiling them was the mistake? That proves our system is failing. The silence that followed was telling. For the first time in Imperial history, member species were looking beyond the Empire's borders and finding something they preferred. Humanity had not just survived exile, they had used it to expose every flaw in the system that had rejected them. Military intelligence presented classified reports showing human military capabilities that far exceeded initial estimates. Their defensive systems are specifically designed to counter our standard attack patterns, reported strategic analyst Kurveth. Every engagement scenario we have run results in unacceptable Imperial casualties. The Empire was discovering that the species they had dismissed as too primitive for full membership had spent 3 centuries analyzing Imperial weaknesses and developing countermeasures. Human military doctrine emphasized speed, flexibility, and overwhelming firepower, exactly the opposite of Imperial ceremonial traditions. Fleet Admiral Zenthkar finally spoke, his voice heavy with implications. We have 3 options: ignore them and hope they remain content with their own territory, attempt to negotiate some form of coexistence, or eliminate them before they become too powerful. To contain the first option was already failing as more Imperial species showed interest in human civilization. The second option required admitting that exiling humanity had been a mistake. The third option meant war against a species that had demonstrated remarkable capabilities and had 3 centuries to study Imperial weaknesses. There is a fourth option. Intelligence Director Velthorn said quietly, we could try to learn from them. The suggestion that the Empire might learn from the species they had exiled was so radical that several representatives left the briefing room in protest. But the data was undeniable. Humanity was building something that worked better than what the Empire had achieved in millennia of dominance. Economic projections showed that human expansion would continue to drain Imperial resources and influence. Within a decade, human territories might represent a significant percentage of galactic economic activity. The Empire that had ruled for millennia was facing competition from a species they had created through their own short-sightedness. As the meeting concluded with no clear resolution, one fact was evident to everyone present: the Empire that had voted to exile Earth was no longer dealing with the same humanity they had rejected. They were facing something new, something that challenged everything the Empire represented. The exile intended to eliminate a threat had instead created something far more dangerous, a successful alternative to Imperial civilization itself. The first diplomatic crisis came not from humanity's expansion, but from what happened when the Empire tried to contain it. Imperial Border Patrol vessel sovereignty had been monitoring the edge of human space for weeks, gathering intelligence on what they still refused to acknowledge as legitimate territory. Captain Tae Young of the human merchant vessel Opportunity received the Imperial hail with professional courtesy, but his response would reshape galactic diplomacy forever. Imperial vessel, you are in neutral space without proper transit permits. Please state your business or adjust course to avoid interference with commercial traffic. The Imperial commander's shock was audible across the communication channel. For 3 centuries, human vessels had deferred to Imperial authority anywhere in the galaxy. Now they were being told they needed permission to monitor humanity's activities. This is Commander Velkith of the Imperial Border Patrol, came the stiff reply. We are conducting legitimate security operations in Imperial space. Captain Tae Young's response was polite but firm. Commander, you are 30 light-years outside Imperial boundaries, monitoring the sovereign territory of the Human Confederation. Unless you have a specific trade or diplomatic purpose, I must ask you to withdraw. The concept of human sovereignty was so alien to Imperial thinking that it took several minutes for Commander Velkith to formulate a response. When it came, it revealed the depth of Imperial assumptions about their own authority. All space is Imperial space until proven otherwise, he declared. Humanity remains subject to Imperial jurisdiction regardless of their current location. It was exactly the wrong thing to say to a species that had spent 6 months proving the Empire wrong about everything. Captain Tae Young's reply was broadcast simultaneously to both his own fleet and the Imperial monitoring station, ensuring maximum diplomatic impact. Commander, the Galactic Empire voted unanimously to exile humanity from Imperial space. You cannot exile us and then claim we are still subject to your authority. Please choose either we are imperial subjects with rights or we are independents with sovereignty. You cannot have it both. The logic was unassailable, but its implications terrified the Empire. If humanity was truly independent, then other species could claim the same status. If they were not independent, then the exile had been illegitimate and possibly illegal under imperial law. Within hours, the exchange had been transmitted throughout human space and had somehow found its way to dissidents in imperial territory. Captain Tae Young had accidentally created the most effective piece of anti-imperial propaganda in galactic history. The Empire's response was predictably heavy-handed. A fleet of 12 vessels arrived to escort the sovereignty back to imperial space and arrest Captain Tae Young for inciting rebellion against lawful authority. What they found instead was the human merchant surrounded by 37 vessels from 14 different species, all claiming neutral trading rights in open space. The crisis had become an international incident involving nearly half the galaxy's major powers. Admiral Jin Woo, commanding the human defense fleet, arrived to find imperial and neutral vessels facing off in what threatened to become the first shooting war in 3 centuries. His solution was elegantly simple and devastatingly effective. All vessels. This is Admiral Jin Woo of the Human Confederation Navy. We are here to ensure free navigation rights for all legitimate traffic in neutral space. Any vessel that fires weapons will be considered hostile to interstellar commerce and dealt with. Accordingly, the message was clear. Humanity was claiming to defend not just their own rights, but the rights of all species to conduct business free from imperial interference. It was a direct challenge to the Empire's assumption of universal authority. Commander Velkith found himself facing an impossible choice. Backing down would acknowledge human sovereignty and encourage other species to claim independence. Fighting would trigger a war that the Empire was not prepared for against enemies they did not understand, while potentially turning neutral species into active opponents. The standoff lasted 18 hours before the Empire blinked. Imperial vessels withdrew to their own territory, but the damage was done. The confrontation had demonstrated that humanity possessed both the capability and willingness to defend their independence, while also showing that other species would support them against imperial overreach. More importantly, it established the precedent that the Empire's authority was not absolute. For the first time in galactic history, imperial vessels had been forced to withdraw from space they claimed as their own. The aftermath was immediate and dramatic. 3 more imperial member species submitted formal requests to establish trade relationships with humanity. 2 others began quiet negotiations about possible independence declarations. The Empire's diplomatic corps found themselves dealing with questions about sovereignty and rights that they had never faced before. Dr. Sumin, humanity's chief diplomatic officer, used the crisis to establish formal diplomatic protocols with dozens of neutral species. We are not asking anyone to choose sides, she explained in her broadcast to the galaxy. We are simply demonstrating that there are alternatives to imperial dominance. Empire had intended to isolate humanity through exile. Instead, humanity had used their independence to become the focal point for every species that questioned imperial authority or sought greater autonomy. Captain Tae Young, who had started the crisis with a simple request for proper identification, found himself celebrated throughout human space as the person who had faced down the Empire and won. His merchant vessel became a symbol of humanity's refusal to be intimidated by their former overlords. The diplomatic implications extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Neutral species that had maintained careful balance between various galactic powers now openly favored human positions. Alliance requests poured in from species that had never before challenged imperial authority. Communications throughout human space buzzed with reports of imperial diplomatic failures as species after species rejected imperial pressure to isolate the human confederation. The Empire was discovering that their authority depended on voluntary compliance, and that compliance was no longer guaranteed. The first diplomatic crisis of humanity's independence had ended with a complete victory for human principles and a fundamental challenge to imperial authority. It would not be the last, but it established the pattern that would define galactic politics for generations to come. Years after the Great Departure, the galaxy was unrecognizable. What had begun as humanity's exile had evolved into the most significant political transformation in galactic history. The human confederation now encompassed over 100 star systems. But more importantly, it had become the center of a new alliance that challenged the Empire's monopoly on civilized space. President Su Jin stood before the inaugural session of the Galactic Freedom Alliance, an organization that would have been impossible to imagine when humanity was voted into exile. Representatives from 43 species filled the Great Assembly Hall on New Geneva Station, each one a refugee from imperial restrictiveness or oppression. 2 years ago, the Empire told US we were too dangerous for civilized society. She began, her words carried simultaneously to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Today we gather to prove that civilization does not require submission to ancient empires, it requires the courage to build something better. The transformation had been remarkable in both speed and scope. Trade coordinator Mi Young presented economic data that revealed the true extent of humanity's success. Alliance trade volume now represents 43% of imperial commercial activity and growing. More significantly, our trade relationships are based on mutual benefit rather than colonial exploitation. The Empire's response to humanity's success had grown increasingly desperate. Intelligence reports from Director He-jin revealed imperial attempts to sabotage Alliance shipping, infiltrate human colonies, and incite conflicts between Alliance members. All had failed, often spectacularly. Their latest operation involved attempting to bribe the Centauri Federation to attack our mining operations, she reported with evident amusement. The Centaurians reported the bribery attempt to us and asked if we needed additional security assistance. The moral authority that humanity had gained through their principled response to exile was proving more powerful than any military force species throughout the galaxy. We're watching humanity's success and questioning why they remain subject to Imperial control. Fleet Admiral Dong Haiyan commanded military forces that had never lost an engagement with Imperial units, but more importantly had never needed to fire the first shot. Our doctrine remains consistent, he explained to the assembled representatives. We defend, we do not conquer, we protect. We do not exploit. The Empire's aggression serves our purposes better than any propaganda we could create. The Alliance's greatest weapon was not its military might, but its demonstration that galactic civilization could function without Imperial oversight. Colony after colony reported prosperity, innovation, and freedom that exceeded anything they had experienced under Imperial rule. Dr. Young's xenobiological research had identified over 200 habitable worlds in previously unexplored regions, all of which were being developed by Alliance members according to principles that preserved native ecosystems while supporting thriving settlements. We are not just expanding into space, she announced, we are expanding the very concept of what galactic civilization can achieve. The Empire had tried to contain the Alliance through economic sanctions. Military pressure and diplomatic isolation all had backfired. Economic sanctions had been met with alternative trade networks that proved more efficient than imperial systems. Military pressure had been countered by defensive strategies that made aggression costly and pointless. Diplomatic isolation had failed as more species joined the alliance or established friendly relationships. With it, Internal Intelligence Chief Park Min-soo presented the most startling development: dissent within imperial space itself. We are receiving communication from resistance movements on over 300 imperial worlds. They are not asking for our help, they are asking for our example. The irony was complete. The Empire had exiled humanity to preserve their own stability. But humanity's success was inspiring exactly the kind of unrest the Empire had feared. Species that had been loyal imperial subjects for millennia were now questioning why they accepted restrictions that the Alliance had proven unnecessary. Ambassador Jinneh, who had once delivered news of humanity's exile, now coordinated diplomatic relations with 17 different galactic powers, most of whom preferred dealing with the Alliance over the Empire. The Empire is discovering that authority based on tradition and fear is fragile when people see successful alternatives. The Alliance's first major test came when the Outer Rim Confederation, a group of 12 imperial worlds, voted to secede and join the Alliance. The Empire's response was swift and violent, sending a battle fleet to restore order to the rebellious systems. The Alliance's response was equally swift but fundamentally different. Rather than meeting imperial forces with military might, they deployed humanitarian vessels to evacuate civilians while broadcasting the Empire's attacks to the entire galaxy. Commander Sungwon led the evacuation. Fleets that rescued over 2 million beings from Imperial bombardment, while Imperial forces found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to engage in traditional warfare. "Every civilian we save is a victory," he reported. "Every Imperial attack on non-combatants proves our point better than any weapon we could deploy." The images of Imperial warships attacking refugee ships while Alliance vessels conducted rescue operations sparked outrage throughout the galaxy. What the Empire intended as a demonstration of strength became proof of their moral bankruptcy. Within months, the Outer Rim crisis had triggered independence movements on dozens of Imperial worlds. The Empire found itself fighting not a single rebellion, but a galactic transformation that challenged their fundamental right to rule. Industrial capacity in Alliance space now exceeded that of the Empire proper. Manufacturing centers on human worlds produced goods that were superior in quality and lower in cost than Imperial equivalents while maintaining environmental standards that the Empire had abandoned centuries ago. The cultural impact was equally profound. Art, literature, music, and philosophy from Alliance worlds celebrated themes of freedom, innovation, and cooperation that stood in stark contrast to the Empire's emphasis on tradition, hierarchy, and control. The final session of the inaugural Alliance Assembly addressed the question that everyone was asking: what came next? President Sujin's answer reflected the confidence that had characterized humanity's response to exile from the beginning. "The Empire asked us to leave because they feared what we might become," she declared to the assembled representatives and billions of viewers across the galaxy. "We have shown them what we became. Free now. We invite every being in the galaxy to join us in proving that freedom is not just humanity's destiny. It is everyone's right." The great departure that had begun with humanity's exile had become the great liberation that was reshaping galactic civilization itself. The Empire that had voted to exile Earth was discovering that they had unleashed forces they could no longer control or contain. Statistical analysis showed that at current growth rates, the Alliance would encompass more inhabited worlds than the Empire within a decade. More importantly, the Alliance was attracting the most innovative and productive members of galactic society, while the Empire was left with those too afraid or too invested in the old system to change. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had used it to build something the galaxy had never seen before: a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination, innovation rather than tradition, and hope rather than fear. The Empire was learning too late that sometimes the greatest threat to an old order is not rebellion, but the simple demonstration that better alternatives are possible. The vote to exile Earth had become the first step in the transformation of galactic civilization itself.